Hey friends, I hope you're doing well. I just heard that Steve Albini passed away, and I wanted to say a few words and pay my respects. And he is 61 years old, which is kind of a shock, I think, to a lot of people. It's way, way too young. But I first learned about Steve Albini through a little bit older friends of mine who were in punk rock circles, hardcore circles in central Indiana. Steve Albini would play in Muncie or in Indianapolis with his band Big Black or Shellac, and these friends would talk about what a great time it was, and I never got to catch any of that. But that's kind of the first that I heard about it, and they would talk about him as a cultural critic, like a critic of the music industry. I knew he was a record producer, although he didn't like that word, recording engineer, and always had something really interesting to say. And that's kind of the spot in my mind that he started occupying, is this person who made albums and recorded other people. He recorded some huge albums, Nirvana, the Pixies, the Breeders, a lot of that kind of stuff. But he was accessible, like extremely accessible, where you could just simply book time at his studio in Chicago, and some local band could go record there and have Steve Albini, the thing. Now imagine, I'm not saying that these producers should be this way, but imagine if you could just simply go record with Jeff Lynne or T-Bone Burnett, Daniel Lanois, just these different people. Just had the time was filled, there's a certain amount of days a year, and you just book the time and you go do it. That's the way it was with Steve Albini. And I know quite a few people who went and did that. They would go in and spend a couple days recording an album in Chicago with Steve Albini putting it together. And you get all of that experience and knowledge of someone who made albums that sold millions, and their aesthetic or whatever. Although he believed in just recording whatever was happening with the band. I'm saying this for those of you who don't know who Steve Albini was, where he believed it was his job to not impose something upon the band. It was to record whatever they were and make a representation of that. I love that idea. There's no one way to make an album. There's plenty of ways to produce it. This is an idea I like a lot, and I wish there were more people, we'll call it a producer, even though I didn't like that term. I wish there were more people like that. And so I have all these friends. I'd be willing to bet most of the albums that he recorded of people probably got pressed at 500 or 1,000 copies, and most of those people have half of them sitting in their basement or their attic still. But that accessibility is a beautiful thing. That's a really great thing, and but part of that is he did not believe in taking royalties from artists. So Nirvana begged him to take points on In Utero, and he just didn't believe it. He took a principled stand for, I don't particularly agree with that stand, but I think it's great that there's a person who's living by the things that they believed in. And so he never got any back-end money. He believed he was doing work on that day. He should be paid for it that day, and then that's that. He believed it's the band that people are buying when they buy the record. They're buying the songs written by the band, the performance, or whatever that artist is, and it's not his job to keep taking money from them. A very principled individual. He's very outspoken, and one of the very first things that I remember thinking, wow, this is an interesting person, was he wrote an article called The Problem with Music, and very famous in the underground circles. It was 1993, I think, when it was published, and I don't know, I'm going to read you like the first couple paragraphs, and this will give you a very good idea of who Steve Albini was. This is the intro to The Problem with Music. Whenever I talk to a band who are about to sign with a major label, I always end up thinking of them in a particular context. I imagine a trench about 4 feet wide and 5 feet deep, maybe 60 yards long, filled with runny, decaying shit. I imagine these people, some of them good friends, some of them barely acquaintances, at one end of this trench. I also imagine a faceless industry lackey at the other end holding a fountain pen and a record contract waiting to be signed. Nobody can see what's printed on the contract. It's too far away. And besides, the shit stench is making everybody's eyes water. The lackey shouts to everybody that the first one to swim the trench gets to sign the contract. Everybody dives in the trench and they struggle furiously to get to the other end. Two people arrive simultaneously and begin wrestling furiously, clawing each other and dunking each other under the shit. Eventually, one of them capitulates and there's only one contestant left. He reaches for the pen, but the lackey says, "Actually, I think you need a little more development. Swim it again, please, and backstroke this time." And he does, of course. That's Steve Albini from The Problem of Music. There's a lot of people in the underground in 1993, that were out there making music, trying to get noticed, who read that. And this goes on. It's a very long article that I will link to down below in the comments. And it just talks about how a band that he knows of signs a terrible deal and they sell a certain amount of records. It wasn't a tiny amount, and they end up owing after like 1 million sales. It's interesting. I've heard people in the industry dispute all of this a few different times, and but I think that this point of view that Steve Albini had is an important point of view to put out there in the world, and it's something I've always kind of I've felt a kinship to that idea of just make a record, man. You don't need somebody's permission. Just do the thing that you like doing. Don't ask permission. You don't have to have some big company give you a contract where you don't even know what you're signing away to do it. Just do your thing. And I like that about Albini and his ideas. So one album I want you to go listen to if you haven't heard it already. I think this is a great example of Albini at his best when recording a band. There's an album called Magnolia Electric Company. The band was called Songs Ohio. Jason Molina was a songwriter. And I remember when I first heard it, it's kind of like all the things that I like best about Jason Molina. And it's a rock record. I say rock, but it's got, like a steel guitar in it and all of that. It feels very Midwestern. It feels very of the time. I think it was probably made in the 90s. I forget when I first heard it. But I remember listening to it and thinking, man, this record sounds great. There's a certain raggedness about it, but it sounds really nice and good. Everything seems appropriate. It sounds like a band playing live together. Like I don't know whether it was recorded live, but it feels like it was. People playing in a room together. These are all things I like a lot about music in general. And I'm thinking, man, this sounds great. Who recorded this or who produced it or whatever? And I looked it up and I'm like, oh, Steve Albini. Okay. So that's always been one that's stuck in my head. There's decisions that are made on there. I think they're decisions because nobody maybe in the band noticed it, and if Albini noticed it, he didn't think it mattered enough to point it out. But there are points in the songs where the band kind of speeds up and rushes ahead and slows back down. A song called Riding with the Ghost, great song, great performance. I think when they come in, it speeds up a little bit and then it eases back. That's what human beings do, You could just simply worry about that and try to get a click going to the grid, blah, blah, blah. And maybe you lose something else in the process if you worry about that. I like the fact that, no, man, this is human beings. This is what the band's doing. Let's go with it. I really dig that. Vocals aren't always in key. I think there's few things as boring as perfect pitch. That's my personal opinion. It's an unpopular opinion. Sometimes when the voice is not right on, it's just more interesting to me. And Molina's voice is kind of like that, where, and you're either going to like it or you're not. It's one of those voices where I love his voice. And I don't know, there's decisions on this record where it feels very human, and I think it had a lot to do with this record surviving the moment it was released in and still being listened to by people. So go listen to that. I'm hoping maybe you guys can turn me on to something that I don't know about. There was a Ask Me Anything on Reddit 10 or 12 years ago that I thought of when I heard about him passing away, and I went ahead and he said a lot of interesting stuff, just fans asking him stuff. And one of the things I remember him saying was that, or he was asked if you could record anybody in history, who would you choose? You know, like back when or whatever. And he said Patsy Cline, Neil Young, and AC/DC, which I think are all brilliant answers. And the Patsy Cline thing made me think about the way he approached recording bands is the same way like the old school Nashville people did, where everything's live in a room. Now the people on those old school Nashville records, I'm talking like way back when, they're extremely gifted musicians and singers, and they would come in and play everything live, and everything, there was no overdubs or anything. So when you're hearing Patsy Cline, I could see where that would appeal to him a lot, because it's people playing live and she's singing her ass off and has so much emotion and feel, and it's extremely gifted engineers and producers who are capturing that. And they probably did a little more shaping and threw out more opinions than maybe Albini would do, but I could see Albini doing really well in that world, you know, and enjoying that. So it made me think, are there like straight up country records that Albini recorded that I don't know about? And I know that our buddies in BR549 recorded with him once. They went in, and I think that it got used as B-sides, and they liked him. And I want to go dig that up and try to find that stuff and listen to it again and get an idea. I remember Jay McDowell, who I had on just a couple days ago. He was friends with Dwayne Eddy, and he was paying tribute to Dwayne Eddy. You should go watch that. I will try to link to it down below. But he talked a little bit about that in the past, and so I'm curious to think of that. But what are the country albums, straight up country, maybe in an old school feel that McDowell or that Albini might have produced that I don't know about? I'm sure they exist. You know, there's a lot of loud rock and stuff like that is what first thing you think of, but I'd like to know. And as far as him recording Neil Young, please, I'm all in for that, although it would probably sound like most of Neil Young's records, but I think that they'd get along great. And AC/DC, I wish that could have happened, because I think it would have sounded like the first 2 or 3 AC/DC records with Bon Scott. I would have loved to have heard a late period. I've always said I would love to hear an album produced by Rick Rubin as an AC/DC album, because I think it would be a throwback to whatever. But the last thing I'll say, and that Ask Me Anything, he said something about someone commented, you produced such and such band or recorded such and such band, and the singer said that you played Scrabble the whole time, and he's not sure if you even know what the record sounds like. So Albini had an interesting response to that. He says, when I first started making records, I would sit in front of the console concentrating on the music every second. I found out the hard way that I tended to fiddle with things unnecessarily, and records ended up sounding tweaked and weird. I developed a couple of techniques to avoid this, to keep me from messing with things while still paying attention enough to catch problems. For a long time I would read, but it had to be really dry, uninteresting stuff. The magazine The Economist was perfect, as were things like technical manuals and parts catalogs. I had a stack of them by the console. It can't be anything interesting or with a story like fiction, because then you can get engrossed and stop paying attention to the session. It has to be really dull. Basically, you're looking for an excuse to put it down and do something else. This has proven to be a really good threshold, so that anything that sounds weird or someone says something, you immediately give it your full attention and your concentration hasn't been ruined by staring at the speakers and straining all day. Lately, I play Scrabble, and it serves the same purpose. That's an interesting way. I've heard from folks that recorded with Rick Rubin that claim he's very hands-off and will sit there reading a magazine through most of it, and then every now and then say to the engineer, "Oh, won't you blah, blah, blah," and then go back to the magazine. And so what sometimes appears to be disinterested, there might be purpose to it. And maybe if you're not constantly telling people, giving them cues and all of that, and you're just laying back. And everybody who's ever made a record knows that feeling of listening way too close and hearing things that really don't matter, but feeling the need to change them or whatever. It's a hard thing to fight, but it's important to fight it because the listener doesn't hear that. I wanted to throw that in. And there was one other thing, but this was, somebody asked him about piracy, and I thought this was a really interesting answer. And this is 12 years ago, so try to put yourself in the 12 years ago mind. He says, "I reject the term piracy. It's people listening to music and sharing it with other people, and it's good for musicians because it widens the audience for music. The record industry doesn't like trading music because they see it as lost sales, but that's nonsense. Sales have declined because physical discs are no longer the distribution medium for mass appeal pop music, and expecting people to treat files as physical objects to be inventoried and bought individually is absurd." He says, "There won't ever be a mass market record industry again, and that's fine with me, because that industry didn't operate for the benefit of the musicians or the audience, and those are the only classes of people I care about." That's Steve Albini. And I think that wraps up a lot of his ideology in a nutshell. But why don't you guys tell me, educate me, the albums that you think are just great albums that he was part of. And like I said, he recorded a lot of local artists. You know, I bet you, if you're in America watching this, I think you probably know somebody who recorded with Steve Albini. And how many, like, people who did albums that sold millions, how many people can you honestly say that about? It's kind of an amazing thing to think of. But like I said, I can think of a dozen different artists that I know. Like just in Indianapolis area alone, I can think of 3 or 5. And I think that's beautiful. But tell me the ones that you think are great, and we'll all turn each other on to stuff, and we'll celebrate Steve Albini's legacy that way. And I'll talk to you guys somewhere down the road. Much love to you.